So hey GBA fans, it's Xilicks here, and welcome back to week 2 of the GBA Fantasy League. Last week was a huge success, so I thank you all for participating and playing, and I hope you continue playing throughout the season. Before we get started with the last week recap, there's a few things I want to note. For future reference, please choose an all-star that isn't included in your pick 6. So for example, if you have Weavile as your all-star, don't also pick Weavile as an offensive pick. Not the biggest deal in the world, but try not to do that for future reference. Also, do your best to have the correct spelling and include the form of the Pokemon if it applies. So for example, if you want to pick Rotom, make sure you tell me whether it's Rotom Heat, Rotom Cut, Rotom Freeze, whatever Rotom it is, because there were some people who, for example, only put the word Landorus and didn't include Landorus I, Landorus T, Incarnate Therian. So please, if it has a form, specify the form. On top of that, I want to give a few shoutouts. So thank you to Dallas Staryu. The Fantasy League can now be followed using the fan document, which is awesome. Big props there. He made it look really nice as well. I also want to thank our analysts Aaron and Stromful, and then also a friend of mine, Farouk, for helping me sort out the picks getting them all done in time. So now let's take a look at last week and see how well everyone did. So looking here, we have the top player was Mr. Murkrow, pulling 69 points. Now, let me just tell you that, like, almost hitting 70 points is huge. Most people didn't even get over, like, 10 or 20. You know, most people were below 20. And having almost 70 points is huge. Like, that is a ton of points. Our all-star was Offensive Hawlucha, scoring 15 points. A lot of people were predicting Mamoswine. A lot of people were guessing things like Victini, Terrakion. But no, it was Offensive Hawlucha pulling in there with 15 points. Huge lead over everything else. And then finally we have our Coach of the Week last week, who was It's Gator, who beat Envy 3-0, scoring 6 points to anyone who picked Gator. So now, let's have a look at how well everyone did. So, on screen now, you can see a snippet of the fan document. Ignore the left side for now. We're just going to be looking over at the right side where the fantasy points are. So, right here you can see how many points were awarded to each of the coaches. So, whichever coach you picked, you can see here how many points you got for it. The all-star, the only one was Hawlucha, so if you picked Hawlucha as your all-star, you got 20 points for that. Here's my pick 6, so I scored 31 points, as you can tell. If you got more than 31 points, then you beat me, and if you didn't, well then, you gotta try better next time, because you can't let me beat you guys. Come on. You guys are supposed to be the diehard fans that know everything. Like, you gotta beat me. So let's take a look at our offensive and defensive mons for this week. So our top offensive mons was Hawlucha with 15 points, Incineroar with 13, and Cresselia with 13. A lot of people picked defensive Cresselia, not many people picked offensive. So those who did pick offensive scored big. Looking over at our defensive picks, we had Togekiss with 14 points, almost tied for All-Star, not quite. We have Tangrowth with 12 and regular Kyurem with 10 points. And then as you can scroll down, you can see all of the other points. You're going to be looking in these bold categories, or sorry, the bold columns to see where the points were. So now, let's look at your guys' actual scores. So right now this section can only be found on the fantasy doc. Both the fan document and the fantasy document will be linked in the description, so you can look through for yourself if you want to. But here, this is only on the fantasy document, and as you can see, here are our top players. So we have Mr. Murkrow with 69 points, Houdini with 60, very close behind, Shinobu with 54, For Certain with 50, Muck DeMarco with 43, Clasp Frame 04 with 40, AMBM58 with 39, I'm Pledge with 39, Magic with 39, Golden Antelope with 38, and Yeezy43 with 38. So as you can see here, it says you can use Control F or Command F if you're on Mac to find your name. So scrolling through, there are quite a lot of names, quite a lot of submissions. Again, thank you guys for really coming out and filling out this document. As you can see on the side, there's a quick reference to all the people who picked the All-Star, which there were not many. So, you know, you can scroll through. If you see your name now, that's great. If you don't see your name, you'll want to look through this document and find it so you can see how many points you got. Keep in mind that this column that I'm mousing over now is your final score. So that's all that matters when it comes to your score. Right, so now that you guys know where to find your points, and you know how the system works because you've done it last week, hopefully you guys can make some improvements from last time. As we can see, things like Mammothswine only ended up scoring 0 offensive points, and Curum Black, another fan favorite, only scored 3 offensive points, where something like Milotic, which a lot of people picked offensively, only ended up getting 2 defensive points. Victini actually did pretty well on both sides. That was another big pick. Zapdos only got 1 point each, so you guys, hopefully after this week, you guys can see a little bit more of how the league works, so you can make better picks next time and hopefully get more points all around. So yeah, next up we are going to go over the U Pick 6 for week 2. You can either, again, copy those picks if you want, or you don't have to. Make sure, though, that whenever you are ready to fill out the form in the description so you can play for week 2. So yeah, let's move right on over to that segment. Okay, so moving into the You Pick 6 section, I actually have a guest who was supposed to be here last week, but is here this week. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I do. What is up, all you GBA type fans? This is Tom here, and I'm very glad to be here with Xilicks. Believe it or not, this series has been in the works for the GBA for a very long time, and I'm very glad that we have a great host to bring it to you guys every week, and I'm glad a lot of you are enjoying it so far.
I'm flattered. So let's get right into your picks. So you did all your picks this week, no help from me. So let's hear your reasoning for your first offensive pick.
So my first offensive pick is going to be something that the other team has very few checks in, and if they are checks, they're not the most defensive, and that's going to be Buzzwole. You look at Tup's team, he has something like Chandelure, maybe Hitmontop, maybe Minior, but overall, Buzzwole being utilized effectively by Monotui is going to do a lot of work.
Yeah, we saw this thing get 11 points last week, so it's definitely an offensive monster when it comes to the way we have these points set up. So do you want to get into your second offensive pick?
Now, fortunately, I guess you could say unfortunately, I didn't feel the wrath of this last week, but instead I felt the wrath of a very pesky crab, and that's going to be Lucario. Now, I say Lucario because when you look at George's team, again, in the right setup, in the right situation, you could see Lars effectively utilizing some sort of boost, special or physical, against George's team. And based on how Mew's invested, or even how bulky Garchomp is, or where it is in terms of HP, Lucario could effectively set up later in the match.
Yeah, so one thing I like about Lucario is not only does it have like a bookload of priority, it also has the ability to be special or physical, and it has like Sword Stance, Nasty Plot, so it can just set up all over the place. I think even agility, so it's definitely capable of getting those sweeps, which just really give offensive mons a lot of points.
And then finally, I guess I will have to go with something that's a little off the wall, but something that could certainly do work, and that's going to be Shaman. Now, Shaman has a proper matchup just based on its typing and an effective an effective fairy coverage with Dazzling Gleam against Steve's team. Just based on its speed tier, based on its relative bulk being an all base 100, and the fact that it could be Life Orb, it could be like a Calm Mindset. Overall, it can do a fair amount of work against Steve's team, and this is more of one of those off the wall picks that, like last week, we saw a lot of people pick Mamoswine and Magearna, while things like Incineroar, Hawlucha, and Latios do more than those would, even though the matchup was really prolific in their favor.
Yeah, so one nice thing with Shaman is I think it has super effective coverage on almost everything, even without running Hidden Power. You might need some for maybe those normal types, but like Earth Power for Xurkitree, Dazzling Gleam, Seed Flare, all that coverage it has, and then even the capability of running a Hidden Power or just being bulkier with does it get Leech Seed?
Does get Leech Seed. Overall, there's not much on Steve's team that wouldn't really like taking a boosted or even Life Orb, Seed Flare plus other move, as a switch in.
All right, so let's move on to your defensive picks.
First of all, defense, I'm going to have to go with Toxapex, just first overall. You look at Duncan's team, and then you look at what Dan is going to do in order to effectively check, right? And obviously, Weavile can go for Poison Jab. It has the Ice and Dark coverage. But then you look at maybe a fully defensive Toxapex, and it could stop a lot of Duncan's very strong offense, mostly in its tracks. Obviously, it takes care of Keldeo, takes care of Lola Marowak, and Weavile does have trouble with Landorus Eye, possibly Celebi, but overall, Duncan is going to have trouble with Toxapex if Dan gets the right matchup against his effective sweepers. So that's why I'm going to pick Toxapex.
Yeah, I think it definitely has the matchup where it might be taking some super effective hits and definitely some resisted hits in there, so it'll be getting a lot of points. And if Dan decides to go the route with Toxic Spikes or even running Toxic, he could get some extra utility points in there.
Yep, totally can see that happening. Next up, I'm going to pick another Mon that I had faced last week, and that's going to be Decidueye. I say this because against George's team, a lot of the things that would set up hazards or would potentially come in and provide a super effective hit, Decidueye can take based on investment and its typing. Mew, obviously, Decidueye is super effective against, can defog to get rid of the hazards that Garchomp or Registeel would set up. It can potentially heal itself or get up just any sort of damage against George's threats, save a few like Volcarona, or it can take big hits from Serperior if it's special defensive. Overall, I could see Decidueye just being kind of a pest for George this week, given that Lars invests correctly.
Yeah, and one thing that Decidueye can do is it can trap some Mons in with the Spirit Shackle and basically force them to attack the Decidueye, racking up even more defensive points in that regard. Yes,
totally can see that happening. And then finally, I'm going to pick something that's maybe it's not a wall that can effectively recover. It's certainly going to be something that is going to be a thorn in someone's side. That's going to be Fortress. I say that because Fortress can remove hazards, it can put up hazards of its own, it can pivot out, and we certainly know that Fortress can take a lot of big hits, knock it down to sturdy, or even less than that, and of course just be annoying until it ends up dying. And that's kind of why I see Fortress being an effective bring this week in terms of the defensive side.
So if I'm not mistaken, last week, I believe Fortress got both 4 in offense and 4 in defense from utility points alone. So yeah, that's what it is. I'm looking at it now. So it's definitely able to rack up those utility points with a very wide variety of hazards, being able to rapid spin, and having that steel typing, which does naturally have a lot of resistances for taking hits for defensive points.
Mm-hmm. And of course, its typing does benefit because, only having one 4x weakness and a lot of means of taking just a lot of hits does appeal for Fortress.
Yep, so that's going to be it for the pick 6. Do you have anything else to say about your picks? You feeling confident? You feeling how do you think it's going to go?
I'm feeling as confident as people were last week for picking Mamoswine and Magearna. So we'll see what happens, but overall this is just like regular fantasy football. Things don't always work out, but it's always fun to have that challenge, and I hope that all of you are enjoying this series as much as I am watching it, and as much as I'm sure Xilicks is, kind of running the whole show.
Yep, it's quite a lot of fun on this end, and there's been a lot of discussion so far. So again, if you guys have not joined the fan Discord, the link is in the description. You can join the fantasy discussion channel. I'm there talking. Sometimes, Tom, you're there talking to people. It's good stuff. Make sure you join in the discussion. That's going to be it for this week. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Xilicks.
My name is Tom.
And I'll see you guys next time. Okay, thanks, bye.
Later.